My own family tried to steal my house. I never thought I'd be in this situation, sitting in my own home, feeling like an outsider while my family schemed to take it away. Growing up, I knew I wasn't the favorite. My brother Jake always got the attention, the praise, the attaboys from our parents. I was just there, the responsible one, the one they could rely on but never reward. Over the years, I got used to it. I worked hard, saved every penny, and finally, I bought my own house. It wasn't much, a small, cozy place that I was proud of. It was mine, my safe space. But of course, it didn't take long for my family to try and take it from me. The trouble started a few months ago when Jake and his wife Liz hit a rough patch. To be honest, I wasn't surprised. Jake had always been reckless with money, and Liz wasn't much better. She had this air of entitlement about her, like the world owed her something just for existing. They had 2 kids and were barely scraping by, living paycheck to paycheck. And it seemed like every time I saw them, they were in deeper trouble. Then one day, my parents showed up at my door. I hadn't seen them in months, and they acted like everything was normal. My mom hugged me like we were close or something, and my dad, well, he just stood there with that usual look of disappointment on his face. After a few awkward pleasantries, they got straight to the point. They wanted Jake, Liz, and their kids to move in with me. Just like that. No discussion, no real conversation about how it would impact my life. They just assumed I'd say yes, like I always did. I was floored. I couldn't believe the audacity. I had worked so hard to get this house. It wasn't easy, and I was still paying off the mortgage, trying to balance my own bills, but they didn't care about any of that. To them, Jake and his family came first, like they always had. My dad tried to guilt trip me, saying it was my duty as the more responsible one to help out. My mom, of course, chimed in with her usual family is everything speech, but I wasn't buying it. For once in my life, I said no. The look on their faces was priceless. My mom's eyes widened like she couldn't believe I had the nerve to refuse. My dad just stared at me like I had slapped him in the face. Jake, who had been silent up until that point, finally spoke up, saying something about how it was only temporary, how they just needed a little help to get back on their feet. But I knew better. Temporary with Jake could mean years, and I wasn't about to give up my home for that. I tried to explain that I wasn't in a financial position to support another family. I told them how I was barely making ends meet as it was, and that I had my own life to think about, but they didn't care. My mom started crying, going on about how hard things were for Jake, how they had no other options. My dad just sat there, staring at the floor like I was some kind of disappointment for not bailing out my brother. And Jake? He had the nerve to act like I was being selfish. The same Jake who had never lifted a finger to help me when I needed it. I'll admit, part of me felt guilty. Not because I was doing anything wrong, but because they were so good at making me feel like the bad guy. But I stood my ground. I told them no, again, and that's when things got ugly. My dad stood up, saying I was ungrateful and selfish, that I didn't understand what it meant to be family. My mom, still crying, said I was turning my back on them when they needed me most. Jake, of course, didn't say anything. He just sat there letting them fight his battle for him, like he always did. After what felt like hours of them trying to wear me down, they finally left. My mom was still crying, my dad fuming, and Jake looking like I had ruined his life. I stood in the doorway, watching them drive away, feeling a mix of relief and anger. Relief that they were gone, and anger that they had even asked me in the first place. It was like they didn't see me as a person with my own life, my own struggles. To them, I was just the responsible one who would clean up their mess. But the worst part? That wasn't the end of it. Over the next few weeks, my mom called me almost every day, trying to convince me to change my mind. She'd start off all sweet, talking about how much she missed me, how family needed to stick together, but eventually the conversation would turn to Jake and how much they were struggling. I told her no every single time, but she didn't stop. She'd call, leave voicemails, even sent me a few texts trying to guilt trip me into giving in. Then Jake's wife Liz got involved. She started posting these passive-aggressive things on Facebook, talking about how some people don't know how to help family when they need it most. She never mentioned me by name, but it was obvious who she was talking about. Her friends, people I didn't even know, started leaving comments about how selfish and heartless I was. It was infuriating, but I wasn't about to stoop to their level. I blocked them all and decided to ignore the drama, but it didn't end there. Liz showed up at my house one day, completely unannounced. She stood on my porch, arms crossed, glaring at me like I had personally wronged her. She didn't even say hello, just started ranting about how I was tearing their family apart by not letting them move in. She went on and on about how they were on the verge of losing everything, how they had no other options, and how it was my duty as Jake's sister to help them. I tried to stay calm, but it was hard. I told her that I wasn't responsible for their problems, that I had my own life to worry about, and that I wasn't going to give up my home for them. She didn't take it well. She started yelling, calling me selfish, accusing me of being jealous of her and Jake. Jealous? Of what? Their constant financial mess? Their inability to manage their lives? It was ridiculous. Eventually, I had enough. I told her to leave, that if she didn't, I'd call the police. She stormed off, but not before making some snide comment about how I'd regret this. I didn't think much of it at the time, but looking back, maybe I should have. A few days later, I noticed something strange. I was getting phone calls from unknown numbers, people harassing me about my decision to not let Jake and his family move in. It was clear that Liz had shared my number with her friends, and they were all trying to guilt trip me into caving, but I wasn't about to let them win. I blocked every number number that called, and after a while, the harassment stopped. I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. One night, I came home to find my house had been egged. I knew it was them, Jake and Liz. There was no proof, of course, but who else would have done it? It was their childish way of trying to get back at me for standing my ground. I cleaned up the mess, but it left a sour taste in my mouth. How could my own family stoop so low? I was furious, but I didn't confront them. I figured it would only make things worse. Instead, I installed security cameras around my house. I wasn't going to let them get away with anything else. I was done being the pushover, the one they could take advantage of whenever they wanted. And just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. Update. I wish I could say the situation got better after that, but it didn't. Things actually spiraled even more out of control. I knew my family could be manipulative, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. After the egging incident and the constant harassment, I thought they might finally back off. But I underestimated just how far they were willing to go. About a month later, Jake came to visit. I was immediately on edge the moment I saw him standing on my porch. He had this look on his face like he was trying to act all calm and reasonable, but I knew better. He hadn't come to apologize. That much was clear. He stepped inside without waiting for me to invite him in, like he owned the place. I followed him into the living room, already dreading whatever he was about to say. He started talking about how hard things had been for him and Liz, how they were barely getting by, and how they just needed a little more time to figure things out. I tried to be patient, but I knew where this conversation was headed. I had heard it all before. Then he dropped the bombshell. He asked if I would sell the house to our parents, just like that. He didn't even try to sugarcoat it. He said they would buy the house from me, but I knew what that meant. They wanted to take it off my hands for a fraction of what it was worth, just so Jake and Liz could live in it. The plan was obvious. Jake would move in, and I would be left with nothing. No house, no compensation, just another favor for my dear brother. I was stunned. I couldn't believe the audacity. I had spent years working to buy this house, and now they wanted to take it from me, as if my hard work meant nothing. I stood there, trying to wrap my head around what he was asking. The nerve of it all, the entitlement, the expectation that I would just roll over and let them take what was mine. I told Jake no. Again. I said it calmly at first, but when he started arguing, I lost my cool. I asked him how he could possibly think I would agree to something like that. I told him that this house was mine, and I wasn't about to hand it over just because he couldn't manage his own life. But Jake wasn't having it. He started going off about how I didn't care about family, how I was selfish for not helping out when they needed me most. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The irony was just too much. Jake, the golden child who had never once helped me, was now calling me selfish? It was ridiculous. I told him that he was the one who had taken advantage of everyone his whole life, that he had always expected people to clean up his messes, and that I wasn't going to be part of that anymore. I said that if he wanted a house, he should work for it like the rest of us. That's when he lost it. He started shouting, saying I didn't understand what it was like to have a family, that I was cold and heartless. He said that I had no right to judge him because I didn't have kids of my own. I was speechless. How dare he try to guilt me like that, as if the only way to be a good person was to have kids and make poor decisions. I told him to leave, that I wasn't going to entertain his nonsense anymore. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him, and I was left standing there, shaking with anger. But as angry as I was, I felt a strange sense of relief. I had stood my ground again. I wasn't going to let them take my home from me. But of course, Jake wasn't done. A few days later, my parents showed up at my door, this time with a different approach. My mom had been crying. Fake tears, if you ask me. And my dad was unusually quiet. They sat down at my kitchen table like they were ready for some big heart-to-heart. I already knew where this was going, but I let them speak. My mom started talking about how Jake and Liz were in danger of losing everything. She said they were on the verge of being homeless, and that it would break her heart to see her grandchildren out on the streets. I could feel the guilt creeping in, but I pushed it down. I knew what they were doing. This wasn't about Jake's kids. This was about Jake getting what he wanted. Again. Then my dad finally spoke up. He said that it wasn't fair for me to hold on to the house when Jake and his family needed it more. He even suggested that maybe it was time for me to give back to the family after everything they'd done for me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What had they done for me? Besides constantly putting Jake first and making me feel like I didn't matter, I told them no. Again. I said that I wasn't responsible for Jake's problems, and that I wasn't about to give up my home for him. My mom started crying harder, and my dad just sat there, shaking his head like I was some kind of disappointment. But I didn't back down. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. A week later, I came home from work to find my front door wide open. Panic shot through me as I rushed inside, terrified that someone had broken in. But when I walked through the house, nothing was missing. No valuables had been taken. Everything was in its place except for one thing. In the middle of my living room, there was a box filled with Jake's stuff. Clothes, shoes, random things that clearly belonged to him and his family. It didn't take long for me to figure out what was happening. Jake and Liz had decided they were moving in, whether I liked it or not. I was livid. I called my parents, demanding an explanation. My mom answered, sounding innocent as ever, and said they were just trying to help me see reason. They thought if they started moving Jake's things in, I'd come around and let them stay. I couldn't believe it. They had literally tried to force me out of my own home. That was the final straw. I told my mom that if Jake's stuff wasn't gone by the end of the day, I would call the police. She tried to argue, but I wasn't having it. I hung up the phone and waited. Sure enough, a few hours later, Jake showed up with my parents in tow, sulking as they loaded the box back into their car. My dad didn't say a word to me, but the look on his face said it all. He thought I was being unreasonable, that I was the bad guy. But I didn't care anymore. I was done. After that, they finally backed off. I didn't hear from Jake or Liz for weeks, and my parents stopped calling as often. It was like they had finally accepted that I wasn't going to give in. I could finally breathe again, without the constant pressure of their manipulation weighing me down. It's been a few months now, and things have been quiet. Too quiet, if I'm being honest. I don't trust it. But for now, I'm enjoying the peace. I've made my home feel like mine again, without the shadow of my family looming over me. But the funny thing is, I don't feel like I've won. I don't feel victorious. I just feel tired. Tired of always having to fight for what's mine. Tired of being the one who has to set boundaries, who has to say no. Tired of being the responsible one while everyone else gets to make bad decisions and expect me to clean up after them. But if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that I'm stronger than I thought. I stood up to my family. I held on to my house, my sanctuary, when they tried to take it from me. And even though it's been exhausting, I know I did the right thing. Jake and Liz are still struggling, from what I've heard through the grapevine. My parents are still helping them out, of course, but that's not my problem anymore. I've learned to let go of the guilt, the responsibility that they tried to place on me. This house is mine, and I'm not going to let anyone take that away from me. I would appreciate any good advice on the matter, just in case if something happens again.